Pluralistic Universe by William James. We are still in Lecture 2, and we may yet finish Lecture 2, in fact, perhaps even in this video. James says, what pluralists say is that a universe really connected loosely after the pattern of our daily experience is possible, and that for certain reasons it is the hypothesis to be preferred. Pluralists, well, he is a pluralist. A pluralist, in this sense of the term, is someone who thinks that reality is not monistic. There is more than one thing that exists. Not all that is one thing. The things that are distinct things. Distinct things, but connected, loosely connected, so that two distinct things like you, me, this book, and my teacup, and your cell phone or your computer, they are all of these things are distinct things, but connected things. A universe really connected loosely after the pattern of our daily experience. That's what James thinks is real, and that's what he thinks matches the pattern of human experience. And the thesis of the pluralists is that a universe like that is possible, and is a better view of the universe than the Hegelian alternative, according to which all is one. What Professor Taylor thinks they naturally must or should say is that any other sort of universe is logically impossible, and that a totality of things interrelated like the world of the monists is not an hypothesis that can be seriously thought out at all. Okay, James here is referring to A.E. Taylor, Alfred Edward Taylor, one of those Hegelian philosophers. And Taylor in arguing against the pluralist position, thinks that the pluralist should overstate his case, basically. Taylor overstates his case by thinking that the pluralist should overstate his case. Taylor thinks that a person who thinks that not all reality is one ought to think that that's the only possible position. And James basically is saying, no, Hegelians, I don't think my position is the only possible position. I think your position is also a possible position. I just think it's not the better position for reasons I will explain later. So James continues, meanwhile, no sensible pluralist ever flies or wants to fly to this dogmatic extreme. No pluralist has the dogmatic view that a monistic universe is not even possible. The pluralist thinks a pluralistic view is patterned after our daily experience and is possible and is a preferable thesis to the monist hypothesis, the monist thesis, the Hegelian view. If chance is spoken of as an ingredient of the universe, absolutists interpret it to mean that double sevens are as likely to be thrown out of a dice box as double sixes are. If free will is spoken of, that must mean that an English general is as likely to eat his prisoners today as a Maori chief was 100 years ago. It is as likely, I'm using Mr. McTaggart's examples, that a majority of Londoners will burn themselves alive tomorrow as that they will partake of food. As likely that I shall be hanged for brushing my hair as for committing a murder, and so forth, through various suppositions that no indeterminist ever sees real reason to make. Okay, so now James is saying that people who deny that there's any real chance in reality, people who deny that there's some element of chance in the universe, people who say all is determined, they look at people who say not all is determined, at the indeterminists who say there's such a thing as possibilities in the world, and we can effect the final state of the world by choosing amongst the possibilities that we think are better. The determinist thinks that the indeterminist must, because he believes that there is such a thing as chance, that there is still some possibility, that there is not only absolute necessity in the universe, the determinist thinks that the indeterminist must think that everything's random and ridiculous, and that anything is just as possible and just as likely as anything else. That a majority of Londoners will burn themselves tomorrow alive is just as likely as that a majority of Londoners will eat breakfast in the morning. That if you roll two dice, which remember only have 6 sides, that it's just as likely that you'll get 2 sevens as it is that you'll get 2 threes or 2 sixes. So in a short summary, the Hegelian types who deny that there's any kind of chance. They say everything is ordained by absolute divine necessity. Those people look at the indeterminists like James, who still think that there's such a thing as chance and possibility and free will, and they look at those indeterminists and they straw man them. They treat them with the straw man fallacy, saying, well, if you believe in free will and possibility and chance, then you must think that just anything is possible. You must think that anything is just as likely as anything else, which is, of course, absurd. It's a straw man fallacy. They're misrepresenting the position they disagree with. James does not want them to misrepresent his own position, and he's trying to understand their position correctly, but he notes that they're misrepresenting his. Skipping a bit, James says, how often have I been replied to, when expressing doubts of the logical necessity of the absolute, of flying to the opposite extreme? When James has doubted the Hegelian philosophy, people have automatically, well, Hegelians anyway, have automatically assumed that he was taking the opposite extreme philosophy. If not all is one, then all must be completely distinct with no connections at all. If not all is determined, then everything must be completely random. But surely there must be some connection among things, people say to James. As if I must necessarily be an uncontrolled monomaniac, insanely denying any connection whatever. The whole question revolves, in very truth, about the word some. Radical empiricism and pluralism stand out for the legitimacy of the notion of some. Each part of the world is in some ways connected, in some other ways not connected with its other parts. And the ways can be discriminated, for many of them are obvious, and their differences are obvious to view. Absolutism, on its side, seems to hold that some is a category ruinously infected with self-contradictoriness, and that the only categories inwardly consistent and therefore pertinent to reality are all and none. Okay, so James is defending in this book the idea of a pluralistic universe against his major opponent, though he also looked at pure materialism and scholastic dualistic theism as other alternatives that he's rejecting. His major opponent here is the Hegelian absolutist philosophy, which says all is one, all is divine. Ultimately, there is no distinction between you and me and my teacup and God. Ultimately, the final perspective that knows all is the divine perspective that knows all and is one with what it knows, and everything is ultimately resolved in the transcendent oneness of the one, of the absolute. The absolute, that's maybe the best word I've got. The absolute ultimately contains everything. James is defending the idea of a pluralistic universe against that Hegelian view. So James is saying that the pluralistic account of the universe, according to which things are connected, but they are also distinct. My teacup is distinct from me, and I am distinct from you, and my tea kettle is distinct from my teacup, and yet all four of us can have our connections. The kettle connects to the cup connects to me, and hopefully I'm connecting to you by telling you what William James says in this video. And there's distinctness in the universe, but there is also connection. And this pluralistic account of the universe is more consistent with the world as we experience it, and to assume that our experiences represent reality as it is, that ultimately reality is pluralistic in this respect, is a perfectly respectable position, and there are some reasons to prefer it to the Hegelian alternative. That's what James is saying. And moreover, he's saying that the Hegelians have tended to sometimes misrepresent positions such as his, and they have tended to assume that a position like that is not possible. They've tended to assume in advance, with no clear reason in favor of their assumption, that if you deny that all is one, you must think that there's no connection at all between things, and that if you deny that all is determined, then you must think that all is therefore random and there's no order to things, and that if you deny that the universe is the one, the all, that you must think that the only other category is none, and that you must believe in none. None meaning that there's no connection between anything. James is saying the radical empiricist perspective recognizes, the pluralistic universe perspective recognizes the legitimacy of some. It's possible that not everything is united in the one thing, in the absolute, and it's possible that there is still some connection. Radical empiricism and pluralism stand out for the legitimacy of the notion of some. Each part of the world is in some ways connected. All right, I think if I continue any further, I'll be repeating myself. I probably already repeated myself, perhaps too much. I think we can begin Lecture 2 in the next video. If you've actually watched all 10 plus minutes of this, thanks for watching.